I'm Solana Rice. I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of Liberation in a Generation, a national movement support organization building the power of people of color to totally transform our economy. Who controls it, how it works, and more importantly, for whom? I'm excited to guest edit this edition of The Forge, an online journal on organizing strategy and practice by and for organizers, along with the co-directors of Black Visions, Candace Montgomery and Miski Noor. We'll be looking back at the uprisings last summer and the longer movement to defund and abolish the police and prison industrial complex. I'm here today with Tracey Corder. Tracey is the Deputy Campaign Director on Policing Work for ACRE, the Action Center on Race and the Economy. We're talking about the cultural and narrative work that needs to happen to make abolition possible and what it would look like to live in a society rooted in abundance and care. Well, why don't we just jump in? I would love to know your personal reflections on this last year. Was this a unique moment?
Yeah, so for me personally, this past year has really been about creating community where I could find it. The pandemic in itself was really hard for me. I live in Oakland. My family is from Milwaukee. And so I used to be able to travel back home, check in on my mom and my niece and all the people I love there. And then it was just like that stopped. And so I had to really look within myself to figure out how to ground myself. And I think in the broader sense, we really saw a public reckoning. We were all at home. We were all consuming the same news on our timeline. Folks who had been really comfortable in ignorance could no longer be comfortable. So they had to make a decision. Like, am I still going to ignore it? Or am I going to try to jump in where I can jump in? And so that, I think, really was what was unique, that there was no escaping it because we were all consuming some of the same things. I think that this mirrors history all the time. It is... I think that my answers would have been different had we not seen what happened in Georgia last night with what happened with the Asian community. And so people are like, how was this person radicalized? I can't believe this happened, or this happened because of Trump's hate speech. And yes, certainly Trump's hate speech had a lot to do with it. But Trump's hate speech is like rooted in the Chinese Exclusionary Act, and it is rooted in Japanese internment camps, right? Like this violence is so ingrained in parts of our history. And what we've always seen is kind of this white lash to like any sort of progress. And this is historical. You can see any time that Black people of color make any sort of strides, there is this pulling back to say, no, we got to make it this again. We got to make it America great again. We got to make these things for us again. And the us is white folks. And so I think that, we saw that in the insurrection. All of these things can be put in historical context. And while they are, I think, shocking and tragic and horrific and sad and heartbreaking, they're not surprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of, backlash, there's a big call to defund the police. And we know that that's partly about dismantling a huge pillar of white supremacy, right? From your perspective, and that's rooted in the founding of our nation, what's the connection between defunding the police and dismantling racial capitalism or having a more just economy? Could we just defund the police and just be like, great, now we're done?
Nope. I have to give a shout out to my dear colleague and friend, Alex Goodwin, who one time we were in a presentation when I first met her, and she said, police are the muscle of racial capitalism. And I said, girl, what? Wait, what now? Say that again. I feel like at ACRE, we use that so often because it is true. And it's just like putting it into that perspective. Police exist to protect property and not us. And we see that over and over. We've seen that throughout history. We've seen that in protests. We've seen that in labor protest. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen the sit-down strikes. Like, police showed up and disrupted that shit. Like, that is what they do. They protect capitalism. And so when we talk about defunding the police, the way I talk about it, it's not just a budget line item. It can't be, because that is not a shift in power. Like the money is in the power is in that money that you shift into community. So defunding the police, I think if we are not careful and if we are not clear about what we mean, we're going to see people use it as an austerity measure. So we've already seen that in Chicago, where we've seen the mayor talk about, oh, we got to cut back on all of the departments. We've seen that in Oakland with Libby Schaaf, where communities were demanding a cut to the police that was reinvested in community. And she was against it, and her people were against it. And then all of a sudden, in the dead of night, with like a bureaucrat, she decided to cut money and take away policing from a community without doing the work to work with that community to see what they wanted to be taken away and to see what was replaced with it. And so when we talk about defunding the police, we're actually talking about shifting power away from the state and giving it to the people who it was taken away from. And I want to also be clear, because I think that when we talk about defund, folks think about, oh, you're giving away something, or this is a handout. And what we're talking about is replenishing the purposeful divestments that have happened from our communities. There has been purposeful cutting of safety nets from our communities, because you need to take that power away from the state and give it back to the people that you took it from in the first place. And so I think all of that plays a part in when we talk about racial capitalism, we talk about policing, the police roles in it. It's not just cutting a budget line item. And it's also not a one-to-one. I started this work really talking about invest, divest. So it was like this thought process that, if you take $20 million away from the cops, then you can put $20 million into education. And that's fine and good. But if we need $100 million for education, then we need to find that $100 million. Because we find it for everything else. There is always money to criminalize our people. There's always money to surveil our people. There's always money to lock our people up. But there's never money to educate us and make sure that we have healthcare and food and housing. And that money is there. And so how do we shift power into making sure that we have the resources that we need?
What is the role of the state? You spoke about removing power from the state, and at the same time, what I'm seeing is that if we need 100 million for schools, the state is the one, especially the federal state, that can make that money happen, because it prints the money.
Right. And could print more money if we're being honest. But
and could print more money, right? So I'm curious about your take on what is the role of the state, knowing that it perpetuates violence and knowing that it can provide those real investments that you were just talking about.
That's an amazing question. And I think that I don't have the full answer, but what I do know is that the answer to how we govern is participatory. So there should not be, I think about how there's this like fascination with bipartisanship. Oh, we have to pass this. It has to be bipartisan. That is stupid. And it's not even true, because the Republican legislators do not even listen to the Republican base. So and I actually hate polling. I don't think polling should dictate policy. I think that morality should dictate policy. But if we're looking at polls of people are for increased minimum wage. People are for healthcare for all. They might not be for, if you are calling it one thing that you have like attacked like years and years, but people are for these things. And so there's not a question of bipartisanship amongst what the bases want or what people want. It's bipartisanship between like the elites who are sent to Congress. And that is the problem. And so folks who are sent into these roles, who are elected, should be following the directive of people. So I'm working with this coalition, the People's Coalition for Safety and Freedom, to repeal the 94 crime bill and replace it through democratically written legislation. So we'd have people's assemblies all over the country, and people who are from impacted communities would say, this is actually what we want on the ground. And so, the 94 crime bill incentivized all of this criminalization. They were like, okay, well, if you do three strikes, and if you do truth in sentencing, if you do this, we're going to give you all this money. And we're saying, what do the people want to be incentivized? What do people who are directly impacted want to be incentivized? And so we want to send a democratically written piece of legislation to Congress to be passed. And I think that's the role of what government should be doing. There should be democratic processes. Democracy is not just going to vote vote on election day, right? Like, it's about making sure that people have their voices heard and that we're able to democratically make decisions.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's also a really important part of a vision for safety. And I'm curious about your position and your vision for safety that replaces policing and imprisonment.
One of the things I say a lot when I'm presenting about this is I think, people expect the other side of abolition to be a utopia. And that's not fair. It is that we have different sets of problems. Yeah. That we work together to fix them, right? We are going to work together to fix problems. We are going to address problems. We're going to see something new. We're going to fix it a different way. We're going to be innovative. And so for me, safety looks like, I do this visioning where I take people through a good day, and I say, what does a good day look like for you? And we envision it together, what it looks like and smells like and sounds like. And then afterwards I say, and who saw police? And who thought where the prisons were? And who was like, when is this PO coming? Nobody thinks that. And so if we can start from that vision to say, okay, we're not going to be there today and we might not be there tomorrow, but how do we build towards this vision where kids can open fire hydrants and play in them in the summer without the police rolling up, right? How do we build towards this vision where there is some abundance and there's some happiness? We do this thing, and I've seen it over and over again, where we want, not the collective, we want poor people to just have enough to survive.
Yeah.
So there's this conversation, and it's even this idea of deserving of a certain amount of money and having to tell us where it goes. And that's not the vision I have for us. I want everybody to have manicures and Jordans. I want everybody to take vacations. I want everybody to have a garden in their community, a green space. I want everybody to be able to have all of the things that bring us joy. And we talk about really basic things that we should have, like clean air, clean water. But what are the things that are above that? What are the things that make your life happy? Yeah. And how do we say that is not a measure of deserving for one person or another, but that we all deserve those things?
Yeah. So I really hear this about abundance, right? And that abundance to support our joy is what we all deserve. And we know what it looks like. What's keeping us from that thought of abundance? Why aren't we there?
Capitalism has really played some tricks on us and made us think that our worth is based on our output. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody is not outputting as much as me, then they don't deserve as much as me. And that's not true. And it's hard because that's reinforced everywhere that we look. And so all of it, it's I talk about this with policing too. I say Law and Order has been a 30-year infomercial for police. This has literally been on our TVs our whole lives, that policing is the good guys and everything else is the bad guy, even when policing is corrupt. It's never looked at as a departmental problem. So you think about TV shows where police officers are corrupt. It's this one officer. Or it's this one officer who's doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. There's a humanization that happens to police that nobody else gets. I think about, I'm into comic books and superheroes. And so I think about even some of our favorite shows about superheroes, like the redemption arc happens when they start working with the police.
Mm-hmm.
So they're vigilantes and they're awful and they're this and they're that. And then the moment they start collaborating with the police, they're like, okay, great. You're a good person now. You're a good superhero now. And so that's a lot to overtake. That is a lot to deprogram. And it's something I'm still working on. It's something that we're all still working on. Like abolition, I think Miriam Cobble says it's a destination. Like it's not. And so we can't believe that folks are going to just see it our way overnight, but we have to organize and listen in our organizing, because sometimes some of my talking points and the things I think have gotten sharper listening to other folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what you're speaking to is the deep narrative and culture work that needs to happen around not only abolition, but also abundance, that we don't have to be the Cosbys, that we don't have to be all these things in order to belong and have and deserve joy and support and livelihoods and abundant livelihoods. What is some of the narrative and culture work that you feel like is most important that either you're doing or others are doing right now that sort of pushes into this new vision of abundance?
I think having young people be able to like take control of media and create their own media has like taught me things. So I think about TikTok. I laugh a lot. Like I can't really be on TikTok. I feel like I'm too old for it. I get a very curated version of TikTok from my other forms of social media because I'm an elder millennial. But like seeing people break things down. And like I saw someone break down like how much $1 billion was with rice.
Yeah.
Like these are the things I think make a difference. So that we're not speaking like up in the air and like trying to hand people a book all the time, because people are trying to go to work and survive too. And so like the stuff that we're trying to hand them is like, okay, so give this to me in 5 seconds. Give this to me in 10 seconds. And this is not an indictment of people. This is an indictment of us as organizers. Because just like you and I, if we got a call from somebody and they're trying to organize with us, we're like, okay, give me the 10-second version.
Yeah.
We know that's what we want. Why can't we create that same version for somebody else? Why do we believe that in order for somebody to be woke or on our level or whatever, which is ridiculous, by the way, but like, why is it that there's the belief that you have to read really thick books? I mean, I love a thick book. I think we should have more study circles. I'm all down with that. But we can have people enter the conversation through like a way to break it down. And I think that has been some of the most valuable cultural work that I've seen. I think of groups like I think of like a group like Good Kids Mad City in Chicago who do amazing mutual aid work, and they've done so much with direct action to teach people about the budget, to teach people about capitalism and racism, and just like these interventions that way have been, for me, what I think are the most valuable. And I see my role as somebody who, you know, helps spread those interventions, helps think through those interventions, and helps empower people to make those interventions.
I'm going to actually go back to I love the idea that we're going to have different problems on the other side of abolition. What kind of different problems are you maybe looking forward to on the other side of abolition that you could imagine on the other side of abolition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always going to be power struggles over who's the decision maker. And I look forward to us like figuring out how to handle that in a different way. I mean, I also look forward to problems like, are we going to walk to the park or to the store? I look forward to having more principled discussions, like rooted in love and caring about the ways that we will care for each other.
And I think I love the idea of more mundane decisions, because right now we don't even get to have, like, too many people don't even get to have those mundane opportunities. right? It's not like whether I'm walking to the store or to the park. It's like, I don't have food. Okay, where am I going to get food? I'm not
Right.
talking about walking anywhere.
It's like, do we build a trolley or a high-speed rail? You know what I mean? Like, which union labor do we go with? Because everybody's unionized. You know, like it's.
Well, I just have maybe just one more question for you. And I'm curious about, in your perspective and in your walkabout, what are you hearing on a continuous basis? And maybe what are you even saying on a continual basis, but remains unheard? Every time you're like, didn't we already talk about this? Didn't we hasn't everybody heard that we need to do X, Y, and Z, or that this isn't what it seems?
Such a good question. I think what I always say is that this is going to be messy. We have been ingrained with every ism. Like that is what surrounds us. And no matter how good of a person that you are, you have been impacted by these isms. And so that's going to show up in the work. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not designed to be perfect. It's designed to be something that we work through together. And I hope that we can have principle, struggle, and grace with each other to figure that out.
I actually do have another question. It goes back to this idea about principled struggle that you just mentioned. Are you finding the time, space, place to have conversations about the principles, right? I feel like, or the values. I've heard a lot of conversation about, well, there's no role for the state, or like we've got to do mutual aid and da-da. And I feel like there's a need to have a space where people are grappling with the principles, but maybe I'm just not in those conversations, especially for Black people, more broadly for people of color. And then I think there's another circle in which those conversations can happen, but particularly in Black-led spaces.
I want to answer that another way. One of the things that was the most freeing, my friends like laughed because I loved it so much, was Angela Davis was talking on a Zoom, and because we were doing everything through Zoom, and she was talking about Black radical unity, and she was like, "Oh yeah, there are people who I don't want to unify with," and I said, "If Angela Davis and I ain't gonna talk to y'all." Like, that's it. And so, principle struggle only happens with people who have principles.
Right.
And there isn't one space. I think that people are obsessed with the idea of things being neat and tidy and things being quiet and like handled behind closed doors. But the reality is, the only people who benefit from things being handled behind closed doors are the elite. And whatever elite means to you, because people who have been on the outside are not allowed behind closed doors. People who are most impacted are not necessarily allowed behind closed doors. And so I think that it's okay to have public struggle.
Were there any questions that you would hope that I would ask and I didn't get to? Or the things that you really wanted to say?
And one of the things I wanted to say was, when I show up to panels, when I show up to interviews, I feel really deeply that the reason people feel what I have to say is relevant is because a Black person had to die. And I feel that really deeply, and it's a lot to carry, but it's necessary to carry so that I know never to center myself. And I think about, even when I show up, so last year I was doing an air purifier project for Oakland when we had the climate crisis, one of several climate crises, the air apocalypse. And I was talking to some of my colleagues, and I was on a panel about some of their research. And I said, "Oh, I'm getting an honorarium. I'll just split it with you because this is your research I'm talking about." And they said, "Oh, just put it to the air purifiers." And I was like, "Wow, thank you." I mean, I was going to do that with my part of it, but to have them believe in the project that much and want to help that in that way, I think that we saw that a lot. And for me, putting as many resources as I could into mutual aid, because that wasn't always the work I was doing. So I had this one project, but there were other projects everywhere. And so figuring out how we can move resources into mutual aid, figuring out how we can uplift those efforts was really central to like how I felt I needed to show up in movement, and how the people I really rock with felt like they needed to show up in movement. That was really important for me to say. And I think it's also really important to try to navigate and continue to struggle through.
Tracey, this was lovely.
Yeah, it was really great.
Thank you for listening. For more conversations like this one, visit forageorganizing.org. We'll see you on Twitter at Forage Organizing. For more information on Black Visions, visit blackvisionsmn.org or follow them on Twitter at blackvisionsmn. You can find more information on Liberation in a Generation at liberationinageneration.org or follow them on Twitter at liberationin. Thank you to Nino Fernandez for post-production audio and editing. And thanks to all of you for listening. Take care and stay safe, everyone.